Alright, so this video is just to show myself that I did actually do what I told myself to do last year. I said I would start the tomatoes and the peppers and all the other stuff around March 1st, and I would start them in the bigger cells, and I did. And so I'm about 3 weeks earlier than last year, ready to plant the tomatoes, and these are about 2 or 3 weeks older than they were last year. So you can see they're a little bit taller than they were. They're not huge, but what I'm going to do is, you see those hairs? Focus. Yeah, you see those hairs? And where the first leaf starts, that's where it ends. So I'm going to plant them that deep, where those hairs end, where the first leaves start. And it's a lot taller than last year. It's about double, because they're a little bit older. The peppers are a couple of weeks older than they were last year, but they're smaller, so I'm not sure what's going on here. But I'm not sure if I'm going to plant these today. Maybe I'll wait a week or two before I do that. Maybe I do today. We'll see. I also put in sunflowers instead of starting them inside. You can't tell from here. Instead of starting them inside, I just put the seeds in the ground 2 weeks ago. And let's see, can get a little bit closer. Yeah, so they came up last week, and they're starting to grow, so we'll see how this works. Also, compared to last year I started my cucumbers inside. I didn't this year. I didn't have time for it, so I just put the seeds in the ground, and they started coming up this week, so that's pretty cool. We'll see how they do. If they get ahead of where the other ones were last year. They're pretty tiny. Here's some marigold. This is one that I just found in this bed as I was preparing it, and I just moved it out of the way and I put it here, and this one is really taking off already. It was pretty tiny. It was about this size. There's some more. There's another marigold. I have 3 cucumbers. This is an English cucumber right here, and then I have a pickling cucumber right here, and then I have another English cucumber right around, whoa, the sun, oh yeah, around here. So this year I have 6 types of tomatoes. 2 that actually I have 7, but the 3 that we grew last year, we didn't like the Kellogg's breakfast so much because the core was really big and there was not a lot of flesh. It was like a third or half of the tomato was just a white core, and then not so much flesh. So we didn't like those that much. We're gonna grow the Paul Robeson and the Pink Oxheart again, and we got 4 new ones that we're gonna try. So I'm having 6 different types. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put the taller varieties on this fence, 1 of each, because this is my dog's toilet. So if I have a very low to the ground cherry tomato, then you need to do a lot of rinsing before you eat anything, because they might and get a little spray of something. Um, and then I'm going to put 8 tomatoes in the back. I'm gonna put one of each of the 4 tall ones that I grow on the fence. I'm gonna put one of those also in the back, and then the 2 shorter varieties, I'm gonna put 2 of each in the back. Fun story. Um, Depending on where you look, our last frost date here in North Texas is somewhere around April 1st or April 15th. Really depends on the website. So a lot of people start planting tomatoes and peppers early April. We're now in the last week of April, and so people are asking me, why haven't you planted yet? Because I've noticed over the past couple of years that around April 15th there often is one more day in that week after April 15th. There's one more day that it freezes. And it happened again. I this time of year I pay very close attention to the 10-day forecast, and I saw some cold coming one night. With most of the nights were in the 50s already, so it would be okay to plant. But I saw a cold coming, and earlier this week, yes, indeed, it froze, and so a lot of people. I don't know if anyone lost any plants, but they sure had to cover them with buckets and cloth, and they had to rush out into the garden and try to fix the situation. And that's why I waited an extra week. I didn't put them in last weekend because I saw the cold coming. Just look at the 10-day forecast and you'll be okay. Wait until all the nights are in the 50s. You may have noticed that there were some empty cells in the tomato and pepper trays. That's because I made a little gift 6-pack for my wife's friend. Because when I posted a picture of the tomatoes that we grew last year, she commented on it and thought it would be nice to give her 2 tomatoes, 2 peppers, 2 marigolds. The garden is a little bit further ahead than it was last year because we started everything a little bit earlier. Instead of in April, we started in March, early March. So here's the lettuce, and the radishes. It's still tiny, but that's my first video last year was in the second week of May. We're now in the last week of April. So by that time they would be probably the same size. I've moved the rosemary and the oregano. I don't think they made it through the Arctic storm 2 months ago, but I just moved them and see if they will come back. We also added some strawberries here in the back, and they'll be allowed to take over this whole area eventually. So maybe next year, we'll have this whole square between the posts maybe all filled with strawberries. For now we have 4. We just bought a pot, like one of those pots at Home Depot, and I thought it was 1 strawberry, but when I went ahead to plant it, I noticed that there were actually 4 strawberries in there. So I pulled them apart, 4 tiny strawberries. I pulled them apart and just put them in 4 spots, and then they'll spread a little bit faster and have a little bit more room. Because this bed is going to be all flowers this year. Here in the front we have those mats that come with seeds in them that you bury a little bit and you can see them peek through the soil. And we casted some seeds. Like I said last year, I actually don't like to do that, but now it's a flower bed and I told my wife, like, this is going to be rough with weeding. We don't know what is what, so we'll see how that goes. And then over here in the middle, we have some bulbs. I think there's about 9 or 10. 3 of them already had green on top of them when we planted them, and the other ones need to come out of dormancy. So we'll see how that goes. And the reason I wanted to put them here with all the other stuff is because these could be perennial. So this is just going to be the flower bed going forward. And then over here I have my preferred method, and that is putting in rows and putting in sticks, so you can actually see what you sowed, and you can actually just, whatever is in between those rows, you can weed. So it's easier to tell what is a weed and what is something that you sowed. This is again going to be the tomato and peppers bed. It's ready. I put in the peat moss, put in a little bit of compost from our compost pile, and when the shade hits this area in a few hours, I'm going to put in the tomatoes and maybe also the peppers. For this year, I added the peat moss to the beds, and I added some compost as well. Last year the compost pile wasn't big enough to really do anything, so I just kept building it. But this year I had enough, like half a wheelbarrow per bed, to add some compost. We composted the tomatoes and everything. Of course, we composted everything, like the tomatoes and the peppers and the tomatoes over there, and the cucumbers and sunflowers, and we composted everything. And before the frost, we got most of the ripe tomatoes and peppers. But it turns out that even the unripe peppers and tomatoes, and even the rotten ones, the seeds were still in the compost. I don't know what that is. Maybe a zinnia, maybe a sunflower, I don't know. It looks like a zinnia or a weed, I don't know. And here's a marigold. Here's a marigold. There's a little tomato. It's a little tomato there. A little tomato here. But it gets worse. Trust me. Little tomato. Bunch of tomatoes. A ton of tomatoes. Oh, tomato, 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 marigold, tomato, 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 marigold, 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 tomato, 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 marigold, 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 tomato, 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 tomato.